It started on a Tuesday night. Nothing dramatic, just the sound of the front door quietly clicking shut around 10:43 p.m. That's how specific my memory is. I was lying on the couch, half watching some documentary on killer whales, half scrolling through emails when I heard it. My wife, Natalie, didn't say goodnight. Didn't mention a late-night walk. Just left. At first, I didn't think much of it. She'd had trouble sleeping lately, tossing and turning, sighing like each breath was a burden. So maybe a walk made sense. We live in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where the biggest scandal last year was someone's Halloween decorations staying up until January. But that night stuck with me. Maybe it was the way she walked out, deliberately quiet, like she didn't want to be noticed. Like she'd done it before. The next night, same thing. She left at 10:38. This time, I got up, walked to the front window, and peeked through the blinds. She was walking briskly down the sidewalk, hoodie pulled up, hands stuffed into the pockets. I watched her disappear toward the end of the street. Left turn, out of view. Same direction. Same hoodie. Same silence. By the fifth night, I'd memorized her pattern. She would go into the bathroom around 10:15, take a longer than usual shower, and then emerge wearing different clothes than what she'd worn all evening. Always a black zip-up hoodie, tight yoga pants, and lipstick. Not the shade she wore around me. Something darker. Sharper. I noticed her perfume lingered longer too. "I just need air," she said once when I asked where she was headed. "Walking helps me clear my head." She didn't kiss me goodnight. She used to, even on the bad days. A week later, I stopped pretending this was nothing. One night, I followed her. I waited 2 minutes after she left, then threw on a jacket, slipped out the back door, and stayed far enough behind that I wouldn't be noticed. It felt ridiculous, like I was some cliché from a detective novel. But my chest burned with something worse than shame, fear. The kind of fear you feel when your gut knows the truth before your brain dares to. Natalie walked faster than I expected. Purposeful. She wasn't just wandering. She passed 3 houses, crossed the street, and, always, turned left at the end of the block. But this time, instead of going all the way out of view, she stopped. At Ethan's office. Ethan, our neighbor, early 40s, ran a boutique design studio out of that converted space on the edge of our street. Nice enough guy. Too nice, maybe. He always wore fitted shirts, always called Natalie by her full name. Natalie, not Nat. Like he enjoyed the way it sounded on his tongue. His car was parked out front. Office was dark. Natalie paused, looked around, then opened the side door and slipped in like she'd done it 100 times. I stayed still. My hands were trembling. The lights didn't come on, but a soft glow flickered in the window near the back, enough to cast shadows. 2 of them. Close. Merging. One taller, one smaller. I didn't want to believe it yet. Could have been a conversation. Could have been anything. But then the taller shape leaned forward, and her head tilted back in the unmistakable posture of 2 people kissing. My lungs forgot how to work. I backed away slowly, heart pounding in my ears, stomach hollow. That night, I sat in the kitchen until 2 a.m., pretending I was reading something on my phone just so I wouldn't fall apart. She came back at 1:22. Walked in like nothing happened. No sweat. No rush. "Hey," she said softly, brushing a hand through her hair. "Hey," I replied. She smelled like cologne. Not mine. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, she wore her robe, made coffee, and smiled at me like the woman I married 13 years ago. Except she wasn't. Something about her was off. Not just guilt, but control. Like she was hiding behind that smile, daring me to ask. Daring me to accuse her without proof. I didn't. I kissed her cheek instead. It felt cold. From that day on, I started tracking everything. Every walk. Every change in lipstick. Every excuse. I wanted to be wrong. God, I needed to be wrong. But deep down, I already knew the truth. It wasn't a phase. It was a ritual. And Ethan's studio wasn't just an office anymore. It was a rendezvous point. A shrine to betrayal. The night I finally followed her all the way, the air felt heavier than usual, like the darkness itself knew what I was about to see. My pulse was already pounding before I even stepped out the door. I kept thinking I'd catch her doing something harmless, something stupid but innocent. Maybe she was meeting a friend, venting stress, avoiding a fight with me. Anything but the truth I feared. But fear has a cruel way of sharpening reality. Natalie left the house at 10:41 that night, earlier than usual. She paused on the driveway, adjusting her hair, smoothing the front of her hoodie. Her movements felt rehearsed, intentional, like she wanted to look a certain way for someone. She walked fast, just like the first time I followed her. I stayed far enough back that even if she'd turned around, I would have been nothing more than another shadow on the sidewalk. My heart slammed in my chest every time she passed beneath a street lamp. Her figure briefly illuminated, clear enough that I could see the slight sway of her hips, the nervous way she touched her lips with her thumb. She wasn't going for a clearing walk. She was going to someone, and that someone was Ethan. I already suspected, but suspicion and confirmation are two very different kinds of pain. One whispers, the other cuts. Natalie reached the design studio on the corner, the converted warehouse Ethan used for his projects. The place always looked a little too modern, too private for my taste. Tonight, the windows were dark. No lights on inside. I crouched behind a tree across the street and watched as she approached the side entrance. She didn't knock, didn't hesitate. She just slipped inside like she belonged there. Seconds later, the faintest glow flickered from the far room, the one Ethan used for brainstorming sessions. It cast just enough light to show movement. Shadows shifting. Two shapes. One was hers. I recognized the curve of her shoulders, the tilt of her head. The other silhouette was broader, taller, leaning in close, too close. I stepped forward, needing a better angle, heart punching at my ribs so hard I could barely breathe. The shadows moved again. Closer. Merging. That unmistakable closeness that only comes from two bodies pressed together with hunger. My stomach dropped. Then I saw what I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. Ethan's hands found her waist, pulled her in. Her head tilted up. Their faces touched, pressed together in a kiss too deep, too slow to be anything but intimate. The truth hit me like a bat to the chest. My wife wasn't lonely. She wasn't stressed. She wasn't walking to clear her mind. She was walking toward him, and she wanted it. I froze, not because I didn't want to storm in there, but because my legs simply failed me. The world spun, my vision narrowed to those two silhouettes sealed in a private moment I was never meant to see. I don't know how long I watched. Could have been seconds. Could have been hours. Time had no meaning when your entire life is collapsing quietly in front of you. At some point, I stumbled backward into the shadows, gripping a street sign to steady myself. My hands were shaking so hard I could hear the metal rattle. I felt sick. Hot. Then cold. Every part of me screamed, do something. Confront them. Shout. Break the door down. Demand answers. But another part whispered something else. Wait. Watch. Learn the truth before you destroy anything. Pain makes strange choices for you. I backed away from the studio, forcing myself to stay quiet. I didn't trust my voice. I wasn't sure if I would scream, or cry, or crumble right there on the sidewalk. When I returned home, I sat on the edge of the bed, her side, and stared at the framed photo of us from 5 years ago. The one where she leaned into me like nothing in the world existed outside our arms. Now she was leaning into someone else. When she eventually returned, 1:17 a.m. this time, she entered the house with the same careful steps she always used during those late-night escapes. She didn't see me sitting in the dark. Her hoodie was slightly twisted, her lipstick smudged. She went straight to the bathroom. I heard the faucet run. I heard her sigh, a soft, satisfied sound that felt like a knife in my spine. When she finally walked into the bedroom, she froze. "You're awake?" she asked, her voice soft, almost surprised. "Yeah," I said. "Couldn't sleep." She avoided my eyes. "I needed some air." "Clear your head." She nodded quickly. "Yeah, something like that." I studied her face. She didn't look guilty. She looked alive. Like whatever happened inside that studio woke something in her she'd been hiding from me. I wanted to ask everything. Instead, I whispered, "Okay." She climbed into bed, turned away from me, fell asleep within minutes. I stayed awake until sunrise, staring at her back, realizing that for the first time in our marriage, she wasn't really next to me at all. The morning after I watched my wife melt into another man's arms, the world felt strangely quiet. Too quiet. Even the air in our kitchen seemed heavier, like it knew something I wasn't supposed to. Natalie hummed while she poured herself coffee, completely unaware that I'd spent half the night replaying those shadowy movements in Ethan's studio over and over until my chest felt bruised from the inside out. She didn't ask why I looked like hell. She didn't notice the dark circles under my eyes. She didn't even look up when I said good morning. But Jenna did. When I stepped outside to throw away the trash before heading to work, She was standing at the edge of her driveway, staring toward Ethan's house with an expression I couldn't immediately read. Arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes distant. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Her head lifted when I walked by. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," I replied, trying to sound normal. I probably failed. Jenna wasn't someone I talked to much beyond the usual neighborly smiles and occasional holiday small talk. She was quiet, calm, the type who always seemed to be holding a secret under her tongue. Her dark hair was pulled up hastily, and she wore an oversized sweatshirt, nothing like the polished look she usually had. "Long night?" she asked, her voice low, careful. I froze. The question hit too close. Too precise. I forced a shrug. Couldn't sleep. Her eyes lingered on me, studying me in a way that made my skin prickle. It wasn't nosy. It was knowing. Then she said it. "Did she go out again last night?" My heart almost stopped. The trash bag slipped slightly from my hand before I tightened my grip. "What?" She didn't repeat herself. She didn't have to. The silence between us pulled tight, an invisible wire connecting two people who suddenly understood each other far too well. Jenna stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I saw her leave. Around 11. Same as the other nights." I swallowed hard. "You've been watching?" She gave a humorless laugh. "Not at first. But Ethan's been working late every night this week. And I'm not stupid." She looked back toward the studio, eyes clouded. For a second, her composure slipped, revealing a rawness that mirrored my own. "You saw something," she said quietly, more statement than question. The breath left my lungs. All the denial I'd been clinging to evaporated. She knew, or at least she suspected enough to read the truth in my face. I nodded numbly. Her shoulders slumped, just barely, like the confirmation took the last bit of strength she'd been holding on to. She whispered, "God." I didn't know what to say. What do you tell someone whose life is falling apart at the same time yours is? The silence stretched, heavy and painful, until she finally looked up at me again, eyes glossy but determined. "When did you find out?" "Last night," I said. The words felt thick in my throat. I followed her. She went to the studio. Jenna closed her eyes, jaw clenching so hard a muscle trembled along her cheek. I knew it. I fucking knew it. Her voice cracked just enough to betray how long she must have been holding the suspicion inside. I didn't ask what she'd noticed. I already knew. Those subtle shifts in behavior nobody else would see, the tiny gaps in a story, the sudden bursts of attention to looks, the distance that grows silently until it becomes a canyon. Infidelity has a pattern, and our spouses were tracing the same lines. She opened her eyes and stepped closer, lowering her voice to almost a whisper. "Did you see them? Together?" I hesitated. She held my gaze, waiting, needing the truth even if it destroyed her. "Yes," I finally said. The word hit her like a blow. She covered her mouth with her hand, her breath stuttering. I instinctively reached out but stopped myself before touching her. The last thing either of us needed was confusion, though something in her eyes told me she wouldn't have pulled away. After a moment, she lowered her hand, straightening. There was pain in her face, yes, but also something sharper, something focused. "They've been sneaking out at the same time," she murmured, "and going to the same damn place." I nodded. "Every night." "Jesus," she rubbed her forehead, pacing once, twice, then stopping abruptly. "It's not just cheating. It's deliberate, coordinated." Her voice trembled with fury. I understood. If betrayal is a knife, planning is the twist. We stood in silence, the morning light creeping across the pavement, our breath visible in the cool air. Two betrayed spouses staring at the same house, the same studio, the same lie. Jenna spoke first. "What are you going to do?" I exhaled slowly. "I don't know yet." "Me either," she said. But the way she looked at me, the way her body stayed angled toward mine, told me something else. We weren't alone in this anymore. And that knowledge settled into my chest like a strange comfort amidst the devastation. Before either of us could say more, Natalie's voice floated faintly from inside our house. "Babe, you leaving soon?" Her casual tone sliced through me. Jenna heard it too. She looked back toward her front door, pain clouding her face again. Then she whispered, "We'll talk later." I nodded. She headed back inside, closing her door quietly behind her. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel completely powerless. Someone else saw the truth. Someone else hurt like I did. Someone else understood. That evening, the world didn't feel real. Natalie sat across from me at dinner like everything was fine. She talked about someone's baby shower at work, mentioned something she read about hiking trails, even asked if we should plan a weekend trip to the lake sometime before winter. Her words were perfectly casual. Her eyes never blinked out of rhythm. It was like watching someone expertly play a role they've rehearsed 100 times. And I played my part, too. I nodded. I smiled. I chewed my food while trying not to throw it up. My mind wasn't in the kitchen with her. It was 4 houses down, on a porch lit with soft amber glow, where I was supposed to meet Jenna after sunset. I waited until Natalie showered, told me she was going to read for a while, and closed the bedroom door behind her. Then I slipped on a hoodie, stepped out into the cold, and walked into the dark like I'd done every night this past week. Except this time, I wasn't trailing betrayal. I was meeting someone who saw it, too. Jenna was already outside, sitting cross-legged on her porch swing, wrapped in a fleece blanket. She had a bottle of wine open, 2 glasses half filled. She looked up as I approached, the tension in her face softening into something that almost resembled relief. "You came," she said. I gave a nod and sat down beside her. The porch creaked under our weight, a comforting sound in a world that felt anything but. "I didn't know what I'd say if you didn't show up," she said after a pause. "I didn't know what I'd say if I did." That made her smirk. "Fair." She handed me a glass. We drank in silence for a while, letting the wine warm the cold ache inside our chests. The neighborhood around us was calm, families tucked in, porch lights glowing, dogs barking faintly in the distance. It was the kind of night you'd never expect to be the setting of something breaking. But something had broken, and we were sitting in the wreckage. "I've suspected for months," Jenna finally said, voice low. "Ethan started staying late more often. Said he had deadlines. His shirts started smelling different. And he stopped touching me." Her voice cracked at that last part. I didn't interrupt. I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself he was stressed, distant, tired. But deep down, I knew. I turned toward her. "Why didn't you say anything?" She gave a bitter laugh. "Because I didn't want it to be real. And honestly, I didn't know who would believe me." The words sat heavy between us. "I get it," I said. "You want to believe it's still worth saving. That maybe if you don't name it, it doesn't exist." She nodded. "But it exists." "Yes, it does." She leaned back, exhaling through her nose. "You saw them in the studio?" I nodded. "Did you see, like—" "They kissed," I said. "Held each other. Long. Like it wasn't the first time." She closed her eyes. "God." I took another sip of wine, trying to swallow the image along with the drink. She's been going out almost every night. Same routine. Same direction. She wore perfume again last night, Jenna said. She hasn't worn it around me in months. A long silence passed between us. "We're fools, aren't we?" she asked quietly. "Believing in these perfect, quiet lives. Believing love protects us." "No," I said. "We're just trusting people. That's not foolish. It's human." She looked at me, her eyes soft but heavy. "I feel so stupid." I shook my head. "Don't. They're the ones who decided to break it. Not us." She stared off into the street. "So what do we do now?" That question held the weight of everything we didn't want to face. It wasn't just about cheating. It was about the shattering of an entire shared history. Dinners, vacations, inside jokes, plans for kids, retirement, Sunday mornings in bed, all of it, now tainted. "We can't just let it keep happening," I said. "We deserve the truth. In full daylight. No more hiding." Jenna's eyes flickered with something fierce. "You're right." I turned to face her fully. "We catch them. Not just guess. Not just assume. We see it. With our own eyes. In real time. Together." She looked at me, lips parting slightly. Then she nodded once. Slow. Deliberate. "Okay." It wasn't just an agreement. It was a pact. "We don't tell them we know," I said. "Not yet," she agreed. "We watch. We wait. And we take back control." Jenna's jaw tightened, but her eyes gleamed with something I hadn't seen before, clarity. "And then, when the time's right," I said, "we burn the whole lie down." She clinked her glass against mine. "To truth. To justice," I replied. We drank. We sat close. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel lost. Jenna poured me a second glass of wine. I didn't refuse it. Her hand trembled slightly as she tipped the bottle. I could hear her breathing change. Not sharp, not broken, just quieter. like she was holding something back that might burst if she let it. We hadn't moved from the porch swing since our pact. The plan was simple, clear. We would wait, we would watch, and when the moment came, we would strike. But in the hush between strategies and heartbreak, something else settled in the air. Something more dangerous. She shifted closer, just an inch, but it felt like a mile. Her thigh brushed mine. Not intentionally, not obviously, but it lingered. And it changed everything. I used to sit out here with him, she said suddenly, staring out toward the street. He'd bring a blanket, we'd drink bourbon and talk about how lucky we were to escape the city. How simple everything was here. Her voice went soft. It's not simple anymore. I swallowed. No, it's not. She glanced sideways. Do you miss her? The question hit hard, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I didn't know which part of Natalie I missed. The woman who used to laugh with me until tears rolled down her cheeks? Or the stranger who now disappears every night, her lips wet with another man's kisses? I miss who she used to be, I said finally. Jenna nodded slowly, like she understood all too well. I used to think Ethan would never look at anyone else. I was sure of it. I was sure I was enough. Her voice cracked. I hate that I wasn't. That last sentence twisted in my chest. I turned toward her, about to say something, anything, to soothe it. But then her hand was on mine. Just lightly. Just resting. But it burned like fire. I didn't pull away. She looked up, eyes glistening. It hurts, doesn't it? Wanting someone who doesn't want you anymore? Yes, I breathed. It does. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was thick with understanding. With shared pain. With a bond that only forms between people watching their lives come apart at the seams together. She leaned her head against my shoulder. Not for long. Not dramatically. Just long enough to feel her warmth sink through the fabric of my hoodie, into my skin, then deeper. I'm sorry, she whispered. I shouldn't. But she didn't move. Neither did I. My heart beat too fast. My mouth was dry. Her perfume was subtle, lavender, maybe, but it was there, just enough to stir something deep in me. Something that hadn't stirred in a long time. We sat like that for what felt like years. When she finally lifted her head, our faces were closer than before. Inches apart. Her breath touched my lips. My hand tightened around hers. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. Me either, I said. But neither of us moved away. I could feel the pull now, thick as rope between us. That unmistakable tension, electric and terrifying, born from loneliness and fury and the desperate need to feel wanted again. Her eyes searched mine. There was fear in them. And want. We leaned forward at the same time. But just before our lips met, so close I could taste her breath, Jenna pulled back. No, she whispered, shaking her head. Not like this. I nodded, breathing hard, heart thundering. You're right. We both sat back, hands still clasped but no longer leaning. She looked away, embarrassed. God, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. You didn't do anything wrong, I said. We're both hurting. This was bound to happen. She looked down at our hands. It felt real. It was real, I replied. But we're not them. That changed something in her eyes. She nodded slowly, squeezing my fingers. We're not. The porch light above us buzzed faintly. Somewhere down the block, a car started. The night went on as if nothing monumental had just almost happened. We need to stay focused, she said. Stick to the plan. I exhaled. Agreed. She finally let go of my hand. I'll keep watching, I said. You let me know if anything changes. I will. She stood first, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. The cold hit me once she left the swing, like her warmth had protected me from more than just the temperature. She paused at the door. Look back. I meant what I said. I do feel something. But not yet. I stood slowly. Not yet. She gave me a weak smile, then disappeared inside. I walked home alone, head spinning, body tense. When I stepped through the front door, Natalie was already asleep on the couch. A show paused on the TV. She looked peaceful, unbothered. I stared at her for a long time. And for the first time since this began, I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was angry and ready. The plan took shape slowly, methodically, over text messages that could have easily passed for neighborly check-ins. A wave emoji. Did she leave yet? He just drove off. Same hoodie again. We never said their names. We didn't have to. The nights began to bleed together. Like clockwork, Natalie left just before 11, often with her hair done in that loose, over-the-shoulder style she knew I liked. A touch of makeup. A hint of perfume she never wore to work anymore. She didn't know I watched her from the upstairs window. Lights off, blinds cracked. 3 minutes later, Ethan's car would pull out of their driveway, headlights off until the streetlight ended. He always parked behind the studio, out of view, like that alone could hide what he was doing. Jenna tracked him from her side. I tracked Natalie. We would meet just down the block, ducking into the shadows, careful, quiet. Silent soldiers in a war we never asked for. It started out purely observational. The first night, we followed from a distance, half a block back, enough to stay hidden but close enough to see. I wore black. Jenna did too. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. When Natalie turned down the alley beside the design studio, I saw her silhouette pause at the side door. Ethan was already there, holding it open. They slipped inside like it was a ritual. We crouched behind a row of trimmed hedges across the street. The building was dark except for one faint light coming from the interior office. Not the entrance. Not the client meeting area. The back. Their secret sanctuary. From where we knelt, we saw shapes again. Moving shadows. Arms reaching. Bodies pressed too close to pretend otherwise. A flash of her leg. A silhouette of his hand on her lower back. They kissed like they didn't care who saw. But they didn't know we were watching. Jenna's breath trembled beside me. Her hands were balled into fists in her sleeves. I didn't speak. My jaw was clenched so tightly I thought I might crack a molar. We stayed there for 30 minutes. No photos. No recordings. We talked about it afterward, back at her porch. Could we use a phone? Could we sneak closer for pictures? Maybe a voice memo? But the windows were tinted, and the angle was too tight. Anything we captured would just look like shadows. Unprovable. Deniable. They'd lie their way out of it, Jenna said bitterly. They're too good at it by now. So we returned the next night. And the one after that. We never intervened. We just watched. Observed. It became a grim routine. Every night, Natalie would leave like she was going to the gym or for a late walk. She never offered a reason anymore. She assumed I didn't care. Or maybe she just assumed I wasn't paying attention. She had no idea how closely I was watching. Ethan stopped pretending too. His late-night, work hours were now predictable. Jenna told me he even started locking his laptop with a new password. Changed the locks on the studio door last week. Bought blackout curtains. They were preparing to hide something they thought was still invisible. But not from us. One night, Jenna and I arrived early. We hid across the street in my car, reclined seats, engine off. Her hair brushed my shoulder in the dark. She smelled like pine and cold air. We said nothing as we waited. Natalie showed up first this time. She looked around, more paranoid than usual, but not enough to notice us. She entered the studio with a hurried gait. Seconds later, Ethan's car pulled up and parked at the back. He didn't even knock. The moment the door shut, the lights went out. Then came the shadows again. I turned to Jenna. Her face was blank, eyes locked on the building like she was burning it into her memory. "We need to catch them inside," she whispered. "Too risky. They're never going to admit it. We need something they can't deny." I nodded slowly. We wait for the perfect night. What would that be? When they're sloppy. When they forget to lock the door. Or when the sounds get too loud. When they think no one's watching. She paused. They'll slip. Eventually. And so we kept waiting. Like predators in the trees. It wasn't glamorous. It was miserable. Cold. Emotionally draining. But it gave me back some sense of control, like I wasn't just sitting in the ruins of my marriage letting her set fire to it with every secret kiss. Jenna and I never crossed the line again. Not physically, but the tension grew. We sat close in the dark. We whispered. We shared hot coffee from the same thermos. Our hands would brush sometimes, unintentionally, and neither of us would flinch. We were two people walking a razor's edge, cut by betrayal, kept upright by revenge. Every time we watched Natalie and Ethan vanish into that studio, the rage came back. But it wasn't raw anymore. It was focused, precise. We were gathering proof, waiting for them to make a mistake. And when they did, we'd be ready. They thought they were clever. They had no idea. They say when you watch something long enough, patterns become visible. Even chaos has rhythm if you're patient. That's how we knew tonight would be different. The day had been unseasonably warm for late fall. Natalie wore a sundress to breakfast, said she was going to run errands after work. Her skin glowed, her hair curled like she'd just stepped out of a salon. She looked beautiful in that soft, dangerous way she always did when she wanted to be wanted. She didn't know I watched her take twice as long getting ready that evening. Didn't know I saw her slip a small bottle of perfume into her purse, the kind she only ever used on vacations or nights we used to spend in hotel rooms when our own bed felt too domestic. She kissed my cheek on her way out. Her lips were warm, but they didn't linger. "Going for a walk," she said. "Might stop at the studio, talk to Ethan about that branding project." Her lies were getting lazy. She didn't even wait for my response before she walked out the door. 10 minutes later, I was already down the street, crouched behind the usual hedges. Jenna joined me 3 minutes later, wrapped in a long gray coat, her hair tucked under a beanie. She didn't say anything, just handed me a small audio recorder. It was the first time we'd tried using one, tucked beneath the shrubs just outside the studio's cracked open bathroom window. "Think we'll hear them?" I whispered. Her eyes didn't leave the building. "If they're loud enough." It felt colder than it had all week, the kind of night that stiffened your fingers and slowed your breath. But my pulse was rapid. I could feel something in the air. A shift. Inside the studio, a single dim light flickered on, then off. Then came the shadows. They entered together. Ethan behind her. He didn't even bother locking the door tonight. They laughed. We could hear it. Natalie's voice was soft, girlish. She said something like, "You're early," and he replied, "I couldn't wait anymore." Then, silence. Then the sound started. Clothing rustled. Furniture creaked. A breathy gasp, unmistakably hers. Jenna's hand gripped the grass so hard her knuckles paled. I turned my head and stared at the ground, jaw clenched so tight I could feel my molars grind. But I heard it all, the whispering, the laughter, the rhythmic creaking of something that was never meant for them. It was like a soundtrack to a nightmare I'd already lived in my head 100 times. Only now it was happening feet away. Real. Raw. Undeniable. Jenna reached for my arm. She didn't say anything. Didn't need to. I turned to look at her. Her face was pale, jaw set, eyes glassy. "This is it," she whispered. I nodded. We waited until the rhythm grew louder, the tempo more frantic. They were careless tonight, greedy. So lost in their little affair they didn't bother keeping it quiet anymore. This was the moment. We stood together and crossed the street in silence. No rush. No panic. Just quiet fury. The studio door was still cracked. Just slightly, but enough that we could hear it all. The soft moans, the words between gasps. "Don't stop. God, you feel so." Then we pushed the door open. We didn't yell. We didn't make a sound. We walked in far enough to see the scene in full. Natalie bent across a desk, Ethan behind her, both half naked, bathed in soft yellow light from a single desk lamp. Her mouth was open in a gasp, his hands gripping her hips like they were the only thing anchoring him to the earth. They didn't hear us at first. But then Jenna dropped her phone. It hit the floor with a hard crack, and the sound sliced the room like a gunshot. Natalie turned her head. Her face crumpled. Ethan froze, his hands still on her, his expression caught between horror and disbelief. "Don't stop on our account," I said. My voice was calm, but I could feel it shaking in my throat. Natalie scrambled to cover herself, fumbling for the edge of the desk. What are you doing here?" Jenna's voice was flat. "We've been watching you. Every night." Ethan stepped back, red-faced and stunned, pants still halfway down. This isn't. "Don't," I snapped. "Don't even try." Natalie looked like she'd been hit. "It's not what you think. We saw everything," Jenna said. "We heard everything." I held up the audio recorder. "Your little sex soundtrack? Caught on tape." The silence that followed was thicker than the moans that had preceded it. Jenna stepped forward. Her voice was ice. "You think we're idiots? You think we wouldn't notice you disappearing every night, coming back smelling like someone else, walking like you'd been fucked hard enough to limp?" Natalie's lip quivered. "Please." Ethan looked like he wanted to vanish. I turned to Jenna. "We're done here." We walked out without another word, left them frozen, tangled in the wreckage they built. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something almost like peace. We didn't go home. We walked, fast, silent, hearts still pounding, back through the cold night toward Jenna's place. The wind bit at our skin, but I didn't feel it. My hands were shaking from something deeper than cold. Rage. Relief. Shock. The image of Natalie sprawled on that desk, her back arched, her moans echoing still in the walls of my skull. It looped on repeat. Jenna didn't speak. She walked one step ahead of me, her jaw set, breath shallow. Her keys jingled in her coat pocket as she reached the porch. She fumbled to unlock the door, her hands trembling so hard the key missed twice before sliding in. When it finally clicked, she pushed the door open and walked straight inside. I followed. She left the lights off. The only glow came from a single lamp in the corner of her living room, warm, gold, casting soft shadows across the space. The silence inside felt padded, like it was holding its breath, waiting for us to make a sound. She stopped in the middle of the room, arms stiff at her sides. I could feel the grief rising in her chest, the way it does when your adrenaline fades and your body finally lets the pain catch up. I knew it because I felt it too. Like gravity pressing harder. Like your lungs forget how to work. Then she turned. Her face, God, her face, was cracked wide open. The walls she kept so tightly sealed these past few weeks collapsed all at once. Her eyes shimmered with tears, but she didn't cry. She just said, "They didn't even look sorry." I stepped closer. "Because they aren't." She blinked slowly, her shoulders folding inward. "They didn't even care that we saw." I nodded. "They thought they could get away with it. They thought we'd never be strong enough to face it." Jenna laughed, hollow and sharp. "Well, we fucking did." The tension between us had always been there, simmering beneath the surface. But now it was different. Now it wasn't just shared pain, it was shared justice. Shared heat. The kind that rises from fire and fury and something deep under the skin, long denied. She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Her lips parted slightly, trembling with unspoken things. And then she said, "I don't want to be alone tonight." I stepped forward until our chests were inches apart. "I don't either." The space between us disappeared. Her mouth met mine with a force that startled us both. Needy, wild, full of the kind of hunger that doesn't come from lust but from starvation. I pressed her back gently against the wall, my hands on either side of her waist, her body arching toward mine like she'd been waiting for this just as long as I had. It wasn't soft. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate. Months, maybe years, of being touched without meaning, kissed without passion, held without love. All of that unraveled in the heat between us now. Her hands found my face, my jaw, my chest, clutching, pulling. My hoodie hit the floor. Her coat slid off her shoulders. I barely remembered how we made it to her bedroom. All I knew was the feel of her mouth, the sound of her breath, the warmth of her skin beneath my palms. We didn't rush. We let it build, slow and intense. Every touch full of meaning, every kiss laced with grief and need, and something dangerously close to hope. Clothes fell away, barriers with them. And when I finally sank into her, she gasped, not from the pleasure alone, but from the release. From finally being seen. From finally being wanted. Her fingers clawed at my back. My name fell from her lips like a prayer and a curse at once. The air was thick with the sound of skin on skin, breath on breath, moans that were louder than we realized. Windows open, curtains swaying. Neither of us cared. We moved like people coming back to life. It wasn't just sex. It was resurrection. When it was over, we lay tangled in the sheets, breathless, slick with sweat, the air still humming with energy. Her head rested on my chest, our legs still knotted together. Outside, a light breeze stirred the trees, and from far off, I heard the faint bark of a dog, a car door slamming. Normal sounds. But nothing felt normal anymore. Jenna whispered, "Do you regret it?" I looked at the ceiling. The fan spun lazily above us. "No," I said. "Not for a second." She tilted her head up. Her eyes were heavy but clear. "Me neither." I ran my fingers through her hair, brushing it back from her forehead. "We didn't cheat." "No," she said, voice hardening. "They broke us first." We lay there in silence for a while, until Jenna suddenly froze, her ear still pressed to my chest. Her brow furrowed. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. I paused, listening. Then I heard it. From outside, faint footsteps on gravel. Then a voice. Natalie's. "What the hell is that?" Another voice, Ethan's. "Do you hear that?" A pause. Then another sound. One that pierced us both. The unmistakable rhythm of a bed spring. A moan. A gasp. Jenna's gasp. Our gasp. Her window was still open. My balcony door had been left cracked. We both bolted upright, breath catching. Outside, there was silence again. Then sudden voices, louder now, panicked and sharp. Jenna grabbed the edge of the sheet, pulled it around her bare body. I reached for my jeans, heart hammering. And just as I stepped to the window, I saw them, Natalie and Ethan, standing in the yard, frozen, staring up at us, at our tangled bodies, our flushed skin, the sheet barely covering Jenna's chest. They weren't the ones catching us. We were. And their faces, they looked like the world just caved in. I didn't move. Neither did Jenna. We just stood there, frozen in the aftershock of what we'd just done, tangled in the sheets, the bedroom thick with the scent of sex and revenge, and something that felt a lot like justice. Natalie and Ethan stood at the edge of the yard, backlit by the porch light, eyes wide with shock. They didn't look angry. They didn't look hurt. They looked exposed, like the earth had opened beneath them and swallowed their smug little secret whole. It was Jenna who moved first. She didn't bother hiding behind the curtain. She walked to the window, sheets still draped around her, her skin glowing in the soft light. She met Ethan's stare and tilted her head, not with shame, but with cool, calculated finality. Ethan took a step forward, stammering something we couldn't hear through the glass. Natalie looked up at me, her face pale, eyes rimmed with red. She wasn't crying yet, but it was building. I could see it like a thundercloud behind her eyes. She mouthed my name. I didn't respond. I just turned, picked my shirt off the floor, and pulled it on without a word. From downstairs came the sound of the front door being thrown open. Heavy footsteps. Raised voices. Are you fucking kidding me? Ethan's voice, already cracking with rage. Jenna didn't flinch. She didn't move from the window. Another voice joined his, Natalie's. How could you? She screamed. You did this on purpose. You wanted us to hear. I stepped into the hallway just as Ethan stormed into the living room, fists clenched, his shirt buttoned crooked in his rush to get dressed. Behind him, Natalie followed, her eyes darting around the house like she was looking for somewhere to collapse. You think this is funny? Ethan snapped, looking at both of us. You two just what? Hooked up to get back at us? Jenna descended the stairs slowly, her sheet held like a queen's robe, face unreadable. No, she said flatly. We connected. Something you clearly forgot how to do. You don't get to act high and mighty, Natalie shot back. You were watching us for weeks. Like a fucking stalker. And you were cheating for months, I said, stepping beside Jenna, my voice low and steady. Don't pretend this was ever about anything else. Natalie's face twisted. So you sleep with her? My neighbor? My friend? I laughed. I couldn't help it. You gave up the right to call yourself my anything the second you spread your legs for him. She flinched like I slapped her. Ethan turned on Jenna. You're not innocent in this. You wanted this. You were probably flirting the whole damn time. Jenna's eyes narrowed. I was trying to keep our marriage from dying. You were out there burying it with your dick. Gasps echoed from the street. I turned. Across the road, Mrs. Reynolds from 2 doors down was standing on her porch in a bathrobe, her little dog tucked under one arm. Curtains shifted in other windows. Lights flicked on. Neighbors were watching. Of course they were. And neither of us cared. Maybe we should go outside, I said to Jenna, my voice calm. Let's make this official. She nodded, chin high. We stepped past Ethan and Natalie, both stunned into silence, and walked out onto the front lawn. Jenna stood tall beside me, still wrapped in nothing but that damn sheet, looking like a goddess of war who didn't care who saw her scars. Natalie and Ethan followed, protesting, but their words were small now. Weak. We saw you, I said loudly, clearly, to no one and everyone. Night after night. We watched you sneak around. We heard what you were doing. You can't prove, Natalie started, but I cut her off. Don't. Just don't. We don't need video. We don't need audio. We saw it with our own fucking eyes. In real time. You can deny it all you want, but we both know it's true. Jenna crossed her arms. We watched you go into that studio like it was your personal sex motel. You thought you were clever. You weren't. Ethan looked around, seeing faces now, neighbors gathering, doors creaking open, phones lighting up. One man across the street was already filming. Jenna turned to him. Get my good side, would you? The crowd let out a faint chuckle. Even in ruin, she had control. Natalie turned to me, her voice shaking. Please, let's talk. Alone. We can fix this. I looked her in the eye, and for the first time, I didn't feel the old pull. I didn't feel the urge to protect her, to fix her, to even yell at her. I felt nothing. We're beyond fixing, I said. You burned it down. I just finally stopped pretending we could put the ashes back together. She reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't. Ethan, red-faced and furious, hissed at Jenna. You just wanted to hurt me. No, she replied. You did that all on your own. I just finally stopped bleeding for you. We turned, walked up her porch steps together, and stood side by side as our two cheating spouses stood on the lawn like children caught with stolen candy. They looked so small from up there. And we looked free. They didn't leave. That's what surprised me most. Natalie and Ethan just stood there on the grass, in the middle of our neighborhood, the porch lights casting long shadows behind them. Natalie's arms were crossed tight over her chest like she was trying to contain the mess inside. Ethan kept pacing, rubbing his hands over his mouth, glancing at Jenna and me like we were the ones who owed him an explanation. Neighbors lingered. One couple down the block leaned against their car, whispering and watching. Someone had their phone out, still filming, maybe live streaming. The irony wasn't lost on me. Our spouses had spent months hiding in the dark, and now they were exposed in the worst kind of spotlight, real life. Natalie took a tentative step forward. Can we just go inside? She said, looking at me like she still had the right to make requests. Please, we need to talk. No, I said. Everything that needed to be said already was. It wasn't real, she blurted. It didn't mean anything. Jenna laughed sharply. You don't fuck someone for months and call it meaningless. It was a mistake, Ethan added, stepping beside Natalie. A lapse in judgment. Jenna descended one step toward him. A lapse that required scheduling, secrecy, locked doors, and night after night of lies. Sounds like a full-time job. His jaw tightened. You don't have to humiliate us. You did that yourselves, I said, stepping up beside her. You're just mad we beat you at your own game. The silence that followed was thick, charged with tension, grief, and the deep ache of truth finally spoken. Natalie's voice dropped. I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't care if you did, I replied. That's worse. She flinched. I kept waiting, I said, hoping you'd stop, that you'd see what you were doing, that you'd remember we had something worth fighting for. But you chose him. Her lip trembled. I didn't choose anything. It just happened. I stepped off the porch, closer now, my voice lowering. That's the problem, Nat. You let it happen. Over and over. You had 1,000 chances to stop, and you never did. So don't act surprised that I finally stopped waiting. Ethan reached out as if to take Jenna's arm, but she stepped back immediately. Don't, she said coldly. You don't get to touch me. Not anymore. We can fix this, he said, desperate now. We can go to therapy. Work through it. Jenna shook her head slowly. I don't want to fix it. I want it gone. He looked like she slapped him. And maybe she had. Just not with her hand, with her clarity. I wasted too many nights wondering why you weren't home, why you didn't want me anymore, she said. I blamed myself. Thought maybe I wasn't attractive enough. Or interesting enough. But it wasn't me. Her voice cracked. It was you. She turned away from him, walking back up the steps. I followed, but Natalie's voice stopped me again. What about us? She asked. Are you really throwing away all those years? Just like that? I turned. I didn't throw anything away. You did. I'm just the one taking out the trash. A few gasps echoed from the neighbors now gathered on their porches. Whispers floated through the night like smoke. Natalie's eyes welled with tears. I made a mistake. No, I said, my voice breaking too now. You made a choice. Every night you walked out that door, you made it again. And now you have to live with it. She opened her mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to beg, but no words came. Just silence. Just the weight of what she'd done. Jenna took my hand. It wasn't planned. It wasn't for show. It just happened. Natural, real, steady. And that single gesture said more than all the screaming in the world ever could. Natalie noticed. Her face twisted, jealousy maybe, or shame, or both. Ethan turned and walked back toward his car. He didn't say another word. He just climbed in and shut the door hard. Natalie didn't move. She looked between us, me, still holding Jenna's hand, and the rest of the neighborhood watching like they were witnessing the final act of a brutal play. Then she broke. She turned and walked away. Not back to our house. Not toward Ethan. Just away. Alone. Jenna and I stood there, watching until she disappeared past the end of the block. Only then did the world exhale. The murmurs stopped. The neighbors disappeared behind their doors again, back into their homes and their warm, faithful beds. And we sat down on the steps, side by side. I didn't think it would feel like this, Jenna whispered. Like what? Not triumphant. Not satisfying. Just quiet. I nodded. It's not a victory. It's a release. We looked out across the street, toward the studio where it all started, toward the homes that now held shattered pieces of lives once whole. They're really gone, she said. They were gone long before tonight. The wind picked up. I shrugged off my jacket and draped it around her shoulders. She leaned into me, not romantically, just there, just present. We sat like that for a long time. And when the cold finally settled deep in our bones, we stood up. Not as husband and wife. Not as a couple, either. But as survivors of something brutal and intimate and real. The war was over, and we were still standing. A strange peace settled over the street in the days that followed. The kind that comes after a storm levels everything. Quiet. Almost eerie, like the world is catching its breath. The leaves didn't crunch any louder underfoot. The dogs still barked in their usual rhythms. But everything felt different now, like the street itself knew what had been exposed. Natalie was gone. I don't know where she went. Her sister's place, maybe. She packed in silence the morning after it all came crashing down. No begging. No apologies. Just a suitcase zipped closed and a door that clicked softly behind her. She didn't look at me when she left. I didn't ask her to. Ethan lingered a few days longer in the house across the street, probably hoping Jenna would crack. But she didn't. Not once. The locks were changed. His name was scratched off the mailbox by day 3. By the end of the week, his car was gone too. Just like that, the cheaters had vanished, swept out with the emotional debris they left behind. Divorce papers were the next step. Quiet, sterile, legal. I met with a lawyer. Jenna did the same. There was no fighting, no ugly property disputes, no dragged-out courtroom drama. Just signatures and notarizations. The marriages had been dead long before the ink dried. We were just finalizing the obituary. Funny how quickly a house becomes just walls and furniture when the person you built it with is no longer home. At night, I still found myself glancing at the couch, expecting Natalie to be curled there, pretending to read, already slipping into lies she thought I couldn't see. But that ache was fading. Not fast, not all at once, but steadily. I started walking in the evenings. Not out of suspicion this time. Not to follow anyone. Just to move. To breathe. To feel the cold in my lungs and know I wasn't trapped inside anyone else's lies anymore. Sometimes Jenna joined me. Sometimes we didn't speak for the first 10 minutes. We'd walk side by side, footsteps in sync, eyes on the pavement or the darkening sky. And when the silence broke, it was easy. Natural. Her voice didn't shake anymore. Neither did mine. We talked about everything but them. Not because we were avoiding it, but because they didn't matter anymore. We talked about books. About music we used to love and had forgotten. About how her garden never grew right, because Ethan always overwatered the tomatoes. About how I used to write stories before work and life and betrayal took up all the space in my head. Some nights, we walked for hours. Other nights, we sat on her porch and let the quiet stretch between us. She told me she'd enrolled in a photography class, something she always wanted to do but never had time for. I told her I'd opened a blank document for the first time in years. Small things, but they mattered. There were moments when we touched, just briefly. A hand brushing a coat sleeve, her fingers lingering near mine on the porch swing. Sometimes I wanted to reach out, pull her in, feel that heat again like we had that one night. But we didn't rush. We weren't trying to fill a void. We were letting something new grow. Carefully. Honestly. One night, 2 weeks after the confrontation, she turned to me as we sat in her backyard under a string of soft patio lights. "Do you think we'll ever trust someone like that again?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, "Maybe not in the same way, but maybe that's a good thing." She looked over, curious. "How so?" "Because blind trust lets people get away with anything. Real trust? That has to be earned. Built." She nodded slowly. "Yeah, built." We sat in that thought for a while. I looked up at the stars, faint and flickering above the suburb's haze. "I don't think I believe in soulmates anymore," I said quietly. Jenna smiled. "Good. That idea always sounded like a setup for disappointment." "What do you believe in then?" She turned toward me. "I believe in people who show up. In people who don't lie when it's easier to lie. Who don't cheat when it's easier to cheat. I believe in choice." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, "So what are we?" She didn't flinch. "We're two people who chose to survive." I liked that answer. I liked her. We weren't rushing into anything. We weren't putting labels on it. But we were walking together now, not sneaking, not hiding, not spying. Just walking, talking, healing. It was enough. One evening, as we stood at the corner where she and I used to part ways on our separate surveillance routes, I realized something. This corner no longer felt like the place where everything broke. It felt like the place where everything had started again. She leaned against the street lamp, her coat wrapped tight, a smile playing at her lips. "Tomorrow?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Tomorrow." And for the first time in months, I meant it.